Greetings from Bern again, dear friends. We are live from the conference on the preservation of the Armenian heritage. Discussions with our keynote speakers and distinguished guests. We are now joined by Dr. Azza Karam, a distinguished global leader in interfaith diplomacy and multilateral advocacy. It's such a joy to have you with us, Dr. Karam. Allow me to share some information with our audience about your work, and then we will discuss topics around the conference. Dr. Karam is the founding president and CEO of Lead Integrity. It's the first women-led global consultancy dedicated to faith-inspired leadership and ethical governance. She has served for over 2 decades at the United Nations, where she founded the Interagency Task Force on Religion and its Multi-Faith Advisory Council, and currently advises the UN Secretary General on effective multilateralism. Her work has shaped interfaith cooperation, peace building, and human dignity across the globe, from the OSCE and EU to grassroots initiatives in different regions of the world, such as Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Today, she spoke at the conference here in Bern on the interfaith and multilateral imperative in times of genocide, a topic that calls us to rethink how faith communities, institutions, and multilateral systems respond when culture and humanity are under threat. Dr. Karam, you speak a lot on of an interfaith and multilateral imperative in moments of genocide. Mm-hmm. This is very specific. Mm-hmm. What does that imperative look like actually in praxis, and especially in contexts of religious and cultural identity are under threat, like the case study we have here in Artsakh and in Nagorno-Karabakh?
The imperative, interfaith imperative, which is part of the multilateral imperative, is a collaboration, active collaboration in service to all communities that takes place, that is led by, that is co-owned by the different religious communities together. In other words, it is imperative that we hear the multilateral governmental voice, but in my opinion, it is sometimes even more imperative, especially when issues of religion and religious identity are concerned. It is even more imperative to hear the multi-religious voice and the actions of service. So important to come together as we are at this conference across the different religious spectra to speak to and for the Armenian genocide. Equally important to speak to and for every other genocide that is taking place, unfortunately, too many, too frequently, to almost all kinds of people. Imperative that we speak together, but even more imperative is the multilateral action that is to be taken by different religions in service to all together. We have not seen this historically. History does not give us examples of this. And yet, this is what happens at local community levels that very rarely gets to be known, and this is what keeps communities socially cohesive, including in times of the worst of breaking apart and tension.
Thank you. In your work throughout, I would say, the United Nations system and framework, you emphasize a lot the importance and how strong as a tool is to refer to the global shared ethical values across faith traditions.
Yes.
How can these values actually be mobilized effectively? We see global interreligious dialogue that these best shared practices and common values becomes the common ground of discussion. We see interfaith dialogue as one of the strongest instruments in global diplomacy as well. What are your insights on that?
In addition to what you've highlighted, I think what we're not seeing enough, and we're not actually acknowledging, even though it is staring us in the face, is the fact that we already have a common values framework. It's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights would not have been possible had we not had the different religious informing the different cultures and the commonality between the respective values. We wouldn't have had human rights if we didn't have religious values. So we already have a common framework. It is imperfect, my goodness, human beings, we create imperfection. It is a definition of what it is to be human. But we have And we not only have the declaration, we also have institutions and legal frameworks that are serving it and upon which international law is based. We don't have to start from scratch. What we have to do is come together in service to what we already have, to honor the institutions, to activate the mechanisms that we already have. The crisis of multilateralism today is not a crisis of the lack of existence of multilateral entities or of the lack of existence of international law. It is a crisis of the lack of respect and honor and implementation of these entities and of the law. And if that continues, we will have no law, no respect for the rule of law. And that is where we stop being human civilization, and we might as well look to other living creatures for the guidance about that. But what we have, we already have. We need to honor. Where we have a default as well, apart from the lack of implementation and respect for the existing mechanism, institutions, and international law, is we have a tendency by certain religious institutions, who are the oldest institutions created by and known to humankind, a lack of respect of some of them to say, we don't need human rights. We have our religious values. Nobody can deny that every single religious institution has its religious values and will long outlive every other institution that humankind has created. But to say we don't need human rights is equal to saying we don't need the common values that sustain our international norms and law. And that is a dangerous path to go down, because it is not enough for any one set of religious values. No one set of religious values will save the unity of our world. All Catholic values, all Protestant values, all Muslim values, etc. No one set will save us in our collective planet. All of them together, and what holds them together as common values, that is what will, and that has already informed the only legal mechanisms we know today.
So often in the global international discussion, we refer to the crisis of multilateralism more and more, this disconnection between multilateral structures and communities or national structures. What are the key reforms or shifts that you would directly propose to international bodies or to faith-based organizations and churches as well? For example, we have the case study of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. We want to ensure a multilateral response to genocide that is not just symbolic, but it's actually impactful in terms of international law and actions.
We have the international system as we know it, multilateralism as we know it, in terms of organizations and institutions that bring together different governments or even different corporate bodies or whatever, suffer from something which is called the siloization complex. We end up dividing our issues that are actually common to all of us, but we divide them into segments. And if you look at the United Nations organogram, you realize that we've really divided into remarkable segments every single aspect of what is fundamentally and completely an interrelated human existence. We look at Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, we look at other genocides in silos, when in fact, that which is hurting Nagorno-Karabakh and Artsakh is hurting me as a Muslim living somewhere else entirely. And it's hurting the Jew and it's hurting the non-believer. We have a shared cultural heritage. It is called the planet. When one part of it hurts, all of us hurt. To believe that we can live in silos and work in silos and implement multi-million and now multi-billion dollar projects in silos that do not take into account our fundamental interrelatedness is to hurt all of us collectively together. One genocide against one people is a genocide against all people. And we have to be able to understand that very human fact. And that's why the call for the religious communities and religious leaders in particular is to say, by all means, cry out in anguish at what is happening to your believers, but cry out even louder in anguish at what is happening to other believers of other faiths, even if some of them come from a faith that is hurting you. Cry out in anguish at the pain, because when you do that, and each of us does that, the cry of anguish will be a collective cry of empowering, strengthening resolve, and never again will become real. Never again cannot become real if we're each talking to our own reality, our own pain. It is a shared pain. And in that addressing of the shared pain comes the ability to overcome and thrive together.
And shall we conclude this brief discussion with your message to the Armenian people, Dr. Karam, and especially the Armenians of the diaspora that are following us? Is the international community following them? Are they alone? what is it that you're able to share?
The pain of the Armenian people is my pain. It is the pain of every single one of us. To ignore that is to ignore the fact that we are all humans and interconnected and dependent on one another. The Armenian diaspora is actually a brilliant example of success in advocacy and empowerment for one another, for their cause, for their issue. They have succeeded where other multilateral mechanisms have failed. So their example of success needs to be celebrated and honored. And third, by no means, last but by no means least, there's a great deal that we can learn from one another. I would love to hear that collective cry of anguish for the people of Gaza, for the people in Sudan. I would love to hear that collective cry because I know that in hearing it, including very much from our Armenian brothers and sisters, comes a cry that can empower all of us. Let us live in service to one another, even when some of us end up hurt some of us.
Thank you. All the best as you continue your service, Dr. Karam.
Thank you very much for having me.
We will be happy to stay connected, and we will welcome you very soon at WCC Communications again.